This program is produced by KAID-TV for the Idaho Public Broadcasting Network.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed by saying no. The motion is carried. The House has adjourned. Sine Die.
After 75 days of struggling to balance a squeaky tight state budget, the Idaho legislature less than an hour ago adjourned for the session. The last day was marked by some major decisions, by some fighting, and by some levity. For the next half hour, we'll sum up what happened in the closing hours. From the state capitol in Boise, the 1981 Idaho legislature. Good evening. The last day of the 1981 Idaho legislature saw action finally on a pay increase for state employees. That was an issue that plagued this session from the very beginning to the very end. This day also saw a last futile effort made to place more money into the budget for the state's colleges and universities. The governor, who was at odds all session long with legislative Republicans, summed up the end this way, I quote, "I think the majority of people in this state are going to decide, as I have, that a group of Republican reactionaries in the legislature has caused great harm to our state." Jean McNeil, who has been our session-long expert on the state budget, which has been the dominant story throughout this session, is here, and it's only fitting that she should have the first story on the last night. Jean?
Thank you. Well, two of the major issues that had to be resolved before adjournment could come today did involve money. Both of them also happened to involve a difference of opinion between the House and the Senate. By the end of the day, the score stood House 1, Senate 1. The House victory came on the question of state employees' pay, and it created the unusual situation of a senator carrying a bill on the floor after having opposed the very same bill in committee just yesterday. Yesterday, the Senate State Affairs Committee voted party line not even to consider the House-passed 7% pay raise. Today, that committee reversed itself, and the full Senate overwhelmingly passed that bill. Carrying it on the floor this morning, Majority Leader Jim Risch of Boise made no mention of his previous opposition.
I want to point out, of course, that that was not fully funded, and as a result of that, there are going to be more vacancies or less people working for state government. It's hoped that most of these will be picked up by attrition. I would expect that most of the loss will be picked up by attrition. I think it's a fair increase. As I said when we passed the original resolution, that of course had some ties to it which did not come to pass. Nonetheless, I felt it was a fair increase at that point. I feel it's a fair increase at this point. I'd urge your affirmative vote. Thank you, Mr. President. Is there further debate?
Minority Leader Ron Twilliger supported the pay hike, but he made it clear he didn't like the way it had been arrived at.
That we would have supported a higher increase for state employees' pay. However, the hour being late and the day being long here, I think this is about the best we're going to get for state employees. Next year, I would hope that the majority party would work with the minority in trying to come to an early solution to the state employees' pay issue. It seems like every year this issue is a political football, and it's always decided, almost always decided on the last legislative day, and I don't think it has to be that. I think reasonable people and reasonable minds, all people being involved in the decision, can come to a fair and equitable solution. And that includes the members of this body, as well as those across the rotunda, and the gentleman on the second floor.
There was some opposition to the pay hike. Two senators objected to the layoffs that they said the underfunding would cause, a third to the way the money would be divvied up.
Now, if we give a 7% pay increase, it will mean that there will be more employees laid off. And it is my feeling that we have, in the last couple of years, we've reduced those employees quite a little bit. So it is my belief that it would be better to not give the increase and thereby not lay off quite so many people.
it was a consensus of opinion among the employees at Idaho State University that they would rather forfeit any kind of a raise rather than to get a raise on the premise of this particular presentation here before us and have their friends and colleagues have no jobs.
Assume an Indian's making $10,000 and assume the chief's making $40,000. The scorecard shows that the Indian's going to get $700 raise this year, and the chief's going to get $2,800, and the pay line is a curve, and the attrition that'll be caused by underfunding and cannibalism, I submit to you, will come from the Indians, not the chiefs.
Well, despite that opposition, the bill did pass 26-8. So state employees will now get a 7% across-the-board increase effective the 1st of July, not as much as the Personnel Commission or the Public Employees Association had recommended, but a good deal more than what it looked like they might get even as late as last night. It's estimated that the underfunding of that pay hike may cost the state some 250 positions, many of which, as Senator Risch said, will probably be handled through attrition. The floor debate today gave no indication of the reason for the Senate's change of heart, but sources after the vote suggested 3 possible explanations. Pressure from the House of Representatives, a desire to force higher education into a state of financial emergency by forcing them to give pay raises at least to their classified employees, or perhaps a desire to see the $4 to $5 million already appropriated for pay hikes go into an across-the-board pay line hike rather than to merit increases. A sidelight on this issue, and perhaps an omen of things to come, in closing debate on that pay hike, Majority Leader Jim Risch suggested that the Republicans might bring out a bill next year replacing the Personnel Commission's controversial salary survey with a bipartisan committee to make recommendations on salaries, much the same way that the Revenue Projections Committee makes recommendations on anticipated revenue. Well, with the pay raise question out of the way this morning, talk turned to more money for higher education and to the possibility of a filibuster on the Senate floor. At issue was a House-passed bill taking $2 million from the Water Pollution Control Fund and giving it to higher education, $1.7 million for general programs, $300,000 for public television. The Senate Finance Committee voted yesterday to hold that bill, but this morning Pocatello Democrat Chick Bilyeu, an ISU faculty member also, arrived with a load of books and papers, prepared to try to pull that bill from committee, and failing that, perhaps to filibuster it out. Well, Bilyeu's maneuver was complicated by the fact that the bill hadn't been in the Finance Committee the required 3 days, and therefore needed suspension of the rules to bring it out. That motion requires a 2/3 vote, and what was more disturbing to Bilyeu, it is non-debatable. What Bilyeu mainly wanted, though, was a chance to speak his mind, and after a series of motions, rulings, and huddles, a way was found for him to have that chance. Taking the floor on a point of personal privilege, a routine request that carries with it wide latitude, Bilyeu used the time to plead the case for higher education and to attack what he called disastrously low $67 million
What our action is doing
appropriation.
here, in my opinion, by this low-level funding, is we are pointing to the direction of dismantling our higher educational system. And there are a lot of very serious long-range consequences. I would like to impress upon you that our college and university system is not like any other annual crop that we can nurture. We can have a failure in potatoes. We can have a drought or a flood and wipe us out totally for 1 year. And the next year, those things can be perfect again. But when we erode the fine higher educational system that we have by low funding, then we are going to have a domino effect for years and years to come in a less efficient, less effective system of education for our young people.
Despite the eloquence of speech teacher Bilyeu, his motion to pull that $2 million add-on bill out of committee didn't get the 2/3 vote it needed, didn't in fact even get a simple majority. And Bilyeu, feeling that he'd been treated fairly, gave up his plan for a filibuster. So the state's 4 colleges and universities will have to divvy up $67 million, an amount many believe and some hope will force them to declare a state of financial emergency. Public television, meanwhile, will get no state money with the exception of $95,000 to maintain the microwave system. Well, it's hard to keep track of all the budget winners and losers on this last hectic day of the session, but with absolutely no guarantees that this list is complete, here are a few. On the losing side, there'll be no more money for air quality, no more for the Office of Aging other than the original appropriation, none for meat inspection, and no more for child development centers. Among the winners today, more money for water resources, for the Woodland Foresters Program, for the Governor's Budget Office, the Educational Commission of the States, and the Franklin Relic Hall. Well, the final figure, according to the Legislative Fiscal Office, spending of $420,611,500, leaving a surplus of $286,000. Mark?
Thank you, Jean. The governor scored what would appear to be a fairly clear legislative victory in the closing hours of the session today. The Senate passed by a 35-0 vote legislation authorizing Idaho's participation in Northwest Power Planning and Conservation Council. The governor had vetoed an earlier proposal that required the state's 2 members to not be from the same political party. That bill that passed today removed that bipartisan provision. Both sides in the Senate called it a compromise.
Frankly, as we indicated previously, we would have preferred to have a bipartisan membership on this council. However, we think that a bill like this is necessary for the people of the state of Idaho, and as a result of that, we're willing to compromise on this and have a bill which will allow Senate confirmation, which this does, and at the next time we come here, we'll be looking at the confirmations to this particular council. In the meantime, it will allow the council to be formed, and it will allow us to participate in the council. I strongly recommend that you vote in favor of this bill.
The close followers of this issue of the Northwest Power Planning Council almost got whiplash from fast start and quick stops on this issue. But we've come full circle here, and I'm pleased to be able to support House Bill 446. I think it speaks well for the cooperation between the minority and majority party, including the governor on the second floor. This is clearly one of the most important pieces of legislation that we're going to pass here this year.
The governor's 2 appointees to the Northwest Power Council, Bob Saxvik and Chris Carlson, will apparently now serve on the council for the next year, that is until they can face Senate confirmation, probably next January. That, too, would seem to be a clear victory for the governor in an area that had been highly charged, very political. All week long here, Senate Democrats have been trying to force a bill from the Senate Local Government and Taxation Committee, a bill that would have removed the sales tax exemption enjoyed by contractors at the Idaho National Engineering Laboratory. Every day this week, the Senate's Democratic leader, Ron Twilliger, has tried to move that bill from committee. Today, on move number 5, Twilliger was successful. But as it turned out, it was but half a victory. The bill was brought to the Senate floor today, but when suspension of the rules did not come about, the bill died on the Senate calendar. The debate on the proposal and the following roll call vote, however, was a good case of intriguing Senate politics. Senate Democrats have wanted the vote on the INEL tax bill because they contend it could raise as much as $14 million for the state next year. The legislation passed the House by a wide margin, but was killed early this week when the Department of Energy's lawyer from Idaho Falls told the Senate Local Government Committee that the federal government would probably sue the state if the exemption were removed. Then the Senate's Local Government and Taxation Committee Chairman, Dane Watkins from Idaho Falls, he represents the INEL area, he again asked today that his committee be excused from reporting the bill to the full Senate. While Watkins was defending his committee's action, Republican John Barker of Buell was walking off the Senate floor right behind Watkins. Barker, to use the legislative terminology, took a walk, agreeing not to vote on the motion. As it turned out, Barker being gone was just what the Democrats needed to force the issue. Twilliger then reviewed his 4 previous arguments in favor of the bill, and then he said this was his and the Senate's last chance.
So Friday, this is my last chance, and this is your last chance. And I had to come up with another reason. I have new information on why we should now bring this bill forthwith from the committee. You know, I've been in this legislature 7 years, and there's one thing that seems to curdle the blood of the members in this chamber, and that is a threat that if you don't do so-and-so, we're going to do thus and thus. And generally, if it's a threat from the federal government, that's the worst threat of all. And do you know we have been threatened? An attorney for the federal government has come into these chambers and threatened to sue us if we pass this bill. I've seen this legislature absolutely reject good legislation on the basis of a federal threat. But here today, we need to pass this bill, and we need to bring it out of this committee, and we need to show the federal government that they can't come in here and threaten us, to sue us. We should call their bluff like we do all the time around here. So I hope that we can increase the rapidity at which I'm gaining and get 2 votes this time. That's all we need, 2 more votes. And I'd urge that we not support the committee and bring this bill forthwith today.
Are we anti-nuclear research and development? I don't think we are. I don't think we will be if we keep that bill in the committee.
But the bill would come out of the committee. With Barker off the floor, Senate Secretary Dorothea Baxter called the roll.
Roll call shows 17 ayes, 17 nays, 1 absent and excused. Under the rules of the Senate, the chair is required to break the tie. The chair is also allowed, under the rules of the Senate, a chance to explain his vote. The chair would say that the committee system is extremely important to this body, and the chair would not do anything which he thought would be injurious to that system. However, the chair also feels that this matter would require 2/3 approval of both the Senate and the House to become law. He sees a benefit to further discussion of this matter. There are some strong ramifications. Nobody wants to injure the fine installation we have in southeast Idaho, which is very important to the state and the nation. But we also must consider that our state coffers need to be fully reimbursed for the services provided by the state. And I think the further discussion of this matter on the floor would be in the interest of the state. Therefore, I vote no. The chairman of the committee Senator District 30, will bring the bill forthwith to the chambers.
Batt's vote broke the tie. The bill was brought from the committee. It was a victory of sort for Democrats, but the bill was not considered for a final vote since a 2/3 vote for suspension of the rules did not come about. Democrats did express some satisfaction later in the day of having got a sort of on-the-record vote on the INEL sales tax exemption question. It would seem a safe bet that we have not heard the last of that idea, even though the bill was hung up here in the closing hours of this session. A number of other bills were left hanging on the Senate's calendar today. A bill that would have repealed the state's Little Davis-Bacon Act, the prevailing wage on public works projects. The Republicans wanted that. Democrats, in turn, wanted that INEL bill. It's more than possible that they sort of traded one off against the other. Neither of them passed. The Senate also hung up a House bill that would have increased the market value on reforested land in this state. Yet another proposal that died in the closing hours of the 1981 legislature dealt with the due-on-sale clause in mortgage agreements. Eric Malone is here now with that story. Eric?
Thanks, Mark. After narrowly passing the House on Wednesday, the bill to eliminate the due-on-sale clause from home mortgage loans ran up against a brick wall yesterday in the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee. The clause allows lending institutions to raise interest rates on loans when a house is sold from the original buyer to a new buyer. Almost 50 people came to testify yesterday during a lunchtime hearing. Burley Republican Dean Van England moved that the bill be held in committee, and it was. Most realtors favored the bill, saying it would allow them to sell more homes. Lending institutions said mortgage loan money from the federal banks would dry up without the due-on-sale clause. The sponsor of the bill, Boise Republican Representative James Golder, says the bill was killed largely due to the powerful savings and loan lobby.
A controversial subject like it is, this is the first year it's been brought up in Idaho. The banking institutions, financial institutions, savings and loans are all very adamantly opposed to it because it represents a tremendous increase in their profits to be able to continue what they're doing. And so they lobbied pretty hard against it. And I think that's basically what happened in the Senate committee, is they lobbied the committee substantially before the bill came over. And so the committee is what you call wired up.
Why was the bill held in committee? I think primarily because we're a day in advance of the adjournment of the Senate. It was an extremely controversial bill.
Stephen Ricks with the Idaho League of Savings and Loan Associations testified yesterday that the proposed bill is unconstitutional because it abrogates existing contracts.
Provision. The legislature can enact legislation which pertains to future contracts that would be entered into, but as to contracts which are already in existence, signed and relied upon by the parties, the legislature has no authority to abrogate those kinds of contracts.
Not all realtors favored the bill. Real estate broker John Browning says some realtors felt it would help home sales, while others thought the money market might dry up for loans.
Our industry is pretty well split right down the middle on whether that should be allowed or it shouldn't be allowed. But we felt that the transaction between a buyer and seller should not be interfered with as far as the lenders are concerned, unless the lender's security interest was impaired in that transaction. If the only motivation for implementing this type of a clause is for the lenders to receive a higher profit picture at the cost of the consumer, you could put an analogy as far as that goes to the gas companies, allowing them to charge $25 a gallon for gasoline, and if it's the only motivation behind it is to receive higher profit.
The lending associations aren't the cause of the inflation which we're all experiencing, and the basic reason for the drafting and proposal of the legislation was to try and solve a long-term problem of inflation. It won't do it. It's a short-term remedy.
What's going to happen is the banks and the savings and loans, and I emphasize savings and loans more than the banks because that's primarily where most of the injustices are being created, basically will put the pressure on the sale of homes. In other words, they'll convert a sale of a home to the point of increasing their profits to the point where it's economically unfeasible for a party to sell the home.
Golder says that a personal run-in with lending institutions caused him to sponsor the bill to eliminate due-on-sale clauses for loans for homes, farms, and ranches.
The problem. United First Federal Savings and Loan on a duplex that I'd sold a while back exercised a due-on-sale to me. It was a very small loan, $17,000, but it cost me an extra $5,000 in loss of equity in the property and escalation in interest rates to get rid of the duplex.
The due-on-sale bill is good for this session, but realtors plan to take another shot at eliminating the clause again next year.
Maybe we can come back at it in something that's maybe more acceptable to the lenders.
The legislators want to go home, and perhaps if the issue is still around next year, they might consider it earlier in the session.
If I'm here, most likely I will bring it up. If I'm not here, I know somebody else will bring it up. And I think it's an issue that will be here every year until it's resolved, either by the legislature or by the courts.
One final note, 3 other bills affecting home loans were introduced this session. They would have allowed lenders to contract renegotiable variable rate interest loans, like the due on sale. But lenders objected to Representative Golder's amendments, saying interest rates could not rise unless the borrower was a poor risk. The savings and loans won out again. All 3 bills were held in committee, just like the due on sale. But Golder says the debate has made the issue of due on sale a public one. And he adds, there's always next year. Mark?
Thanks, Eric. Auto dealers were smiling in the Senate lobby today while car manufacturers were glumly heading for phone booths to phone Detroit. The Senate approved a proposal requiring manufacturers to pay the full cost of warranty repairs. The issue was bipartisan, with Democrats and Republicans both agreeing that manufacturers should pay dealers whatever it costs to make repairs under warranty. The Senate passed the bill. The vote was 25 to 10. It now goes to the governor. The House ended this session on perhaps not the best note late this afternoon. The House hassled on and off all day today about whether CUNA Republican Lyman Winchester could request unanimous consent to change a vote he made way back on February 20th. Yesterday, the House granted that request, but the House's parliamentarian, Peggy Bunting, a Boise Republican, thought better of it overnight. An Attorney General's opinion was sought on the subject early today. At about 5 this evening, amid some very short tempers and some hard personal feelings, the House refused to allow Winchester to change his vote. At one point, Winchester accused Bunting of talking over the Attorney General's opinion with the Attorney General before the opinion had been delivered to the House. The tempers again were very short, and this exchange occurred.
I have not spoken to the Attorney General, nor did I go down there. I bumped into the Attorney General coming back from the lunch hour with Representative Kearns right beside me, and he told me he had sent the opinion forthwith to the House. The lady demands an apology of the gentleman.
The lady's point is before the group. Does the gentleman District 19 care to respond?
If the lady didn't discuss the matter, then I was misinformed, and on that one point I will apologize to the lady.
Does the lady accept the apology?
To be penitent, Mr. Speaker, is to be almost innocent. Therefore, the lady accepts the apology.
The House hassle today was over what's called a paired vote, a procedure by where an absent lawmaker can arrange to vote on paper as long as he can find another member who wishes to vote in the opposite way. Lieutenant Governor Phil Batt, the presiding officer in the state Senate, displayed even for him some rare humor today, announcing a paired vote of a different kind in the Senate.
There is a pair at the desk.
It was a real pair. A closing note, personal in nature tonight. A great many people work on this broadcast, and many have worked very diligently over the course of the last 3 months to prepare and present it. Presenting a daily broadcast on the going-ons of the Idaho Legislature is a major challenge, and we think it is a major responsibility as well for public television. We've been presented with a difficult task over the course of the last few weeks of occasionally having to report on our own budget being eliminated. No reporter likes to report a story in which he is personally involved. We have tried to do it objectively. We continue and will continue to report on the actions and to analyze the results of this session in the days that lie immediately ahead. We hope that you will be there. Now, if you will, sit for just a moment and read the credits as they roll tonight. These are the people who make this broadcast work. I'm Marc Johnson. Good night from Boise.
This program is produced by KAID TV for the Idaho Public Broadcasting Network.